It was a damp, foggy night in late October 1998 when Sarah took her shift at the Rusty Anchor, a rundown dive bar on the edge of Portland, Oregon. The place was a time capsule of decay, warped wooden walls reeking of stale beer and cigarette ash, a neon "open" sign that flickered like it was gasping for life, and a jukebox that hadn't played a note in decades. Sarah, 24 and hardened by too many late nights, liked the predictability of it all. The regulars were a rough bunch, truckers with bloodshot eyes, drifters with nowhere else to go, and locals who'd long since given up on anything better. She knew their orders by heart, their stories by rote. But that night, something shifted. Around 11 p.m., the door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, unnaturally thin, his frame draped in a gray coat so worn it looked like it might disintegrate. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, leaving only the faint outline of a jaw too sharp, too hollow. He didn't approach the bar. Didn't order a drink. He just shuffled to the far corner, sat down, and folded his hands on the table. Sarah noticed him right away. His stillness was eerie, like a predator lying in wait. She tried to ignore him, pouring a bud for old Pete and wiping down the sticky counter, but her eyes kept drifting back. He hadn't moved. Not an inch. The bar churned on around him. Pete slurred about a storm rolling in from the coast, his whiskey breath fogging the air. Two bikers in leather vests argued over a pool shot, their laughter harsh and grating. The noise should have drowned out the unease creeping up Sarah's spine, but it didn't. She felt watched, pinned, like a butterfly under glass. Around midnight, she glanced up again, and her stomach dropped. His head had tilted, just slightly, and beneath the hat, two pale, unblinking eyes stared straight at her. They weren't just looking, they were boring into her, cold and relentless, like they could see every secret she'd ever buried. She turned away, heart hammering, and busied herself with a stack of grimy glasses. When she looked back, the chair was empty. No glass, no crumpled napkin, nothing to prove he'd been there. She asked Pete if he'd seen the guy leave, but he just shrugged. What guy? The bikers hadn't noticed either. Sarah forced a laugh, blaming it on too many double shifts, but the unease lingered. Closing up at 2 a.m., she stepped into the fog-choked parking lot, the streetlights barely cutting through the haze. She swore she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, trailing her to her car, but when she spun around, there was only mist, thick and suffocating. The next night, he was back. Same coat, same hat, same corner. Sarah watched him this time, her nerves fraying with every hour he sat there, motionless. Around midnight, a drunk regular named Tommy stumbled over to his table, slurring an offer to buy him a drink. The man didn't answer. Tommy, oblivious, clapped a hand on his shoulder, and froze. His face drained of color, eyes wide with something beyond fear, and he lurched back to the bar, muttering, "He's not right, not right." Sarah pressed him, but he just shook his head, downed his beer, and bolted out the door. By 1 a.m., the bar had emptied out, leaving Sarah alone with him. The air grew heavy, the lights dimming as if the power was bleeding away. She could feel his stare, even with her back turned. Her phone died mid-dial to her manager, the screen flickering black despite a full charge. Then she heard it, a low, guttural hum, like a voice drowning in tar, rising from his corner. She whipped around, and he was standing now, just feet from the bar. His hat was off, revealing a face that wasn't a face, pale, featureless, like wax melted smooth, with those unblinking eyes drilling into her soul. She screamed, dropped her rag, and ran. Sarah bolted through the back door, her keys slipping from her shaking hands as she stumbled into the alley. The fog swallowed her, curling around her legs like icy tendrils, but she didn't stop, not until she reached her apartment, slamming the door and jamming the lock. She sank to the floor, sobbing, her breath ragged. Sleep never came that night. Every creak of the old building, every flicker of shadow, sent her heart racing. She called in sick the next day, then the next, until her manager's threats forced her back. She couldn't afford to lose the job, not with rent due. When she returned, the bar felt normal again, too normal. The man was gone, the corner booth empty. She asked the regulars if they'd seen him, but no one remembered. Not Pete, not the bikers, not even Tommy, who'd touched him and fled. Sarah started to doubt herself. Maybe it was exhaustion, or the cheap tequila she'd sipped to steady her nerves. But then, wiping down the bar, her fingers brushed something under the mat, a Polaroid, yellowed and creased. It showed the rusty anchor decades ago, packed with smiling faces, clinking glasses. And there, in the corner, was the man in the gray coat, his unblinking eyes staring straight at the camera. She quit the next day, moving across town to sling hash at a diner instead. She thought she'd escaped, but a year later, she ran into Pete at a gas station. He looked like hell, hands trembling, eyes sunken. He told her the rusty anchor had burned down, 'cause unknown. Firefighters found a hidden room behind the corner booth, bricked up and forgotten. Inside were bones, human skulls, animal ribs, some too warped to identify, all charred black. Scratched into the wall was one word, watch. Pete said the cops called it a fluke, but he'd heard whispers from old-timers about a figure tied to the bar's past. Sarah couldn't let it go. She dug through library archives, unearthing clippings from the 1950s about vanishings tied to the rusty anchor. Patrons would be seen drinking, laughing, then never again. One article mentioned a suspect, a tall man in a gray coat, dubbed the Watcher by locals. He'd sit in bars, staring, until someone caught his eye, then they'd disappear. The police never caught him, dismissing it as myth. But Sarah knew. She'd felt those eyes, that hum, that presence. The Polaroid sat in a locked drawer now, a relic she couldn't burn or face. Years passed, but the fear never faded. She avoids bars, checks corners compulsively. At night, she hears that hum, faint, distant, like it's searching for her. She stopped drinking, stopped going out after dark, but it's not enough. Last month, a friend sent her a photo from a new bar downtown, a candid shot of a crowd. In the background, half hidden by shadows, was a figure in a gray coat, hat tilted low. She hasn't slept since. She knows he's still out there, watching, waiting for someone new to claim. In the winter of 2003, Jake started working nights at the Blue Lantern, a dingy bar in rural Ohio. The place was a squat brick building off a forgotten highway, surrounded by snow-dusted fields and skeletal trees. Its clientele was sparse, farmers drowning their sorrows, travelers too tired to drive on, and the occasional oddball who didn't fit anywhere else. Jake, a 29-year-old drifter with a knack for fixing things, took the gig to keep gas in his truck. The bar had a single TV mounted above the counter, an old CRT that buzzed and flickered, its picture forever tinged green. The owner, a gruff widower named Hank, warned Jake never to turn it off. "Keeps the place alive," he'd grunt, though Jake figured it was just superstition. The first few weeks were uneventful. Jake poured drafts, mopped floors, and nodded through tales of lost crops and broken marriages. The TV droned in the background, stuck on a dead channel of static, its hiss blending with the wind rattling the windows. But one night, mid-January, the static shifted. Jake was alone, wiping down the bar at 1 a.m., when he heard it, a voice, faint and garbled, cutting through the white noise. "Help me," it rasped, slow and deliberate, like someone speaking through a broken radio. He froze, staring at the screen. The static pulsed, forming vague shapes, fingers, maybe, or a face, before dissolving back into chaos. He checked the cables, smacked the side of the set, but nothing changed. The voice came again, louder this time. "Help me," Jake's skin prickled. He grabbed the remote and mashed the power button, but the TV stayed on, the static growing angrier, the voice more insistent. "Help me." He yanked the plug from the wall, and the screen finally went black. Silence flooded the bar, heavy and wrong. He laughed it off as a glitch, but when he plugged it back in, Hank's rule echoing in his head, the static returned, and so did the voice, now a whisper, "You shouldn't have done that." The next night, it got worse. A handful of regulars were scattered around, sipping beers, when the TV flickered again. The static warped into a shadowy outline, a figure, tall and hunched, standing still. The voice broke through, clear as day, "I see you, Jake." The patrons didn't react, didn't hear it, their eyes glued to their drinks. Jake's throat tightened. He asked a farmer named Earl if he'd heard anything, but Earl just shrugged, "TV's always been crap." Jake didn't push it. By closing time, the figure on the screen was sharper, its head tilted, watching him. He locked up fast, the voice echoing in his ears as he drove home through the snow. Jake didn't sleep much after that. He told himself it was the wind, the isolation, playing tricks on him. But when he returned the next night, the TV was already on, static crackling before he even flipped the lights. The voice greeted him, "Welcome back, Jake." He ignored it, focusing on the handful of customers trickling in, a trucker, a quiet woman in a red scarf, Earl again. The bar felt colder, the air thick with something he couldn't name. The TV's glow cast long shadows across the room, and the figure in the static was clearer now, too clear. It had arms, legs, a head that lolled to one side, like a puppet with cut strings. Around midnight, the trucker complained about the noise. "Turn that damn thing down," he growled, but Jake hadn't touched the volume. The static roared, drowning out the jukebox, and the voice cut through, "Don't ignore me, Jake." The trucker didn't flinch, didn't hear it, just kept drinking. Jake's hands shook as he poured shots, his eyes darting to the screen. The figure was moving now, slow, jerky steps, like a film reel skipping frames. It stopped, turned, and faced him. Two dark hollows stared out where eyes should have been. He told Hank the next day, begging him to ditch the TV. Hank laughed, his gravelly voice dismissive. "Been here longer than you, kid. It stays." Jake didn't argue, he needed the money, but he started noticing things. Scratches on the bar counter he hadn't seen before, deep and jagged, like claw marks. A glass shattered in his hand, unprovoked, slicing his palm. And the woman in the red scarf, she came back every night, sitting silently at the end of the bar, watching the TV with a faint smile. Jake asked her name once, but she just pointed at the screen and whispered, "He knows mine." By week's end, the bar felt alive in a way it shouldn't. The static voice grew personal, "You're weak, Jake, you can't run," and the figure loomed larger, its edges bleeding beyond the screen. One night, Earl stayed late, half drunk, and pointed at the TV. "That thing's haunted, ain't it?" he slurred. Before Jake could answer, the voice boomed, "Yes," and Earl's beer bottle exploded, glass shards flying. Earl stumbled out, cursing, and didn't come back. Jake was alone again, the figure's hollow eyes tracking his every move, its voice a constant murmur in his skull. Jake couldn't quit, he was broke, stranded, but he couldn't stay sane either. He started researching the Blue Lantern's past, digging through old newspapers at the county library. In 1987, a man named Daniel Reese, a regular, had vanished after a bar fight. Witnesses said he'd been arguing with someone no one else saw, screaming at the TV before storming out into a blizzard. His truck was found abandoned, engine running, but he was never seen again. Another article, from 1992, mentioned a bartender who quit after claiming the TV talked to him, calling him by name. The locals laughed it off, but Jake didn't. He confronted Hank, showing him the clippings. Hank's face darkened. Reese was a drunk. TV's just old junk, he snapped, but his eyes flickered with something, fear, maybe. Jake pressed, and Hank finally muttered, "Found it in the basement when I bought the place. Plugged it in, and it worked. Never turned it off since." Jake demanded to see the basement. Reluctantly, Hank led him down creaking stairs to a damp, concrete room. In the corner, beneath a tarp, were boxes of junk, photos, clothes, a wallet with Reese's ID. And scratched into the wall, "I'm still here." That night, Jake worked his last shift. The TV was deafening, the static a wall of sound, the figure nearly life-sized, its hollow eyes blazing. The voice screamed, "You can't leave me, Jake," as the lights flickered and died. The woman in the red scarf stood, her smile gone, and pointed at him. "He wants you," she said, her voice echoing with the static. Jake grabbed his keys and ran, the bar shaking behind him as if something was breaking free. He didn't look back. Months later, he heard the Blue Lantern had closed. A fire gutted it, starting near the TV, though no one could explain how. Jake moved states, took a factory job, but he still hears the static some nights, faint and insistent, calling his name. He doesn't own a TV anymore. Doesn't trust them. In the fall of 2009, Lisa took a job at the Black Mare, a crumbling pub in a small coastal town in Maine. The bar was a shadow of its past, salt-stained beams sagged under decades of neglect, rusted anchors hung crookedly on the walls, and a massive, tarnished mirror stretched behind the counter, reflecting the dim glow of flickering bulbs. Lisa, 27 and fresh off a messy breakup, needed the cash and the distraction. The regulars were a weathered lot, fishermen with calloused hands, retirees nursing grudges, and loners who stared into their drinks like they held answers. The place smelled of brine and whiskey, a scent Lisa grew to tolerate. Her first night, she noticed the mirror. It was old, its edges chipped, with a jagged crack running diagonally from top left to bottom right. The owner, a stooped man named Grady, caught her staring and grumbled, "Don't mess with it. Been here since my granddad's time." She nodded, assuming it was sentimental junk, and got to work pouring drafts and dodging small talk. But as the night wore on, something felt off. The mirror didn't reflect right, her movements lagged, like the glass was slow to catch up. She chalked it up to tired eyes and the bar's eerie vibe. Around 1 a.m., with only a few stragglers left, Lisa wiped the counter and glanced up. Her reflection wasn't alone. Behind her stood a figure, blurry, tall, in a dark coat, where no one should have been. She spun around, heart racing, but the bar was empty save for old man Ted, slumped over his rum at the far end. She looked back, and the figure was gone, her own wide-eyed face staring back. She laughed nervously, blaming the late hour, but when she turned off the lights to lock up, she swore she saw movement in the glass, something shifting in the dark. The next night, it happened again. A busy Friday, the bar packed with locals shaking off the week, and Lisa caught it, a face, not hers, peering out from the mirror's cracked edge. It was pale, hollow-cheeked, with eyes too large, too dark. She blinked, and it vanished. She asked a regular, Jenny, a chain-smoking widow, if she'd seen anything weird about the mirror. Jenny snorted, "That old thing. Gives me the creeps, but it's just glass." Lisa wasn't convinced. By closing, the bar emptied out, and she saw it again, multiple faces now, faint and distorted, crowding the reflection, watching her. She grabbed her coat and left, the hairs on her neck standing up as she drove home through the fog. Lisa couldn't shake the unease, but bills kept her coming back. She started avoiding the mirror, keeping her head down as she worked, but it didn't help. The faces grew clearer each night, men, women, some young, some old, all with that same hollow stare. They didn't move, just watched, their eyes following her across the bar. The regulars didn't notice, lost in their drinks and chatter, but Lisa felt them, a weight pressing on her chest. One night, a fisherman named Paul lingered after last call, nursing a beer. She caught him staring at the mirror, his face pale. "You see it too?" she asked. He nodded, voice low. "They've been there since I was a kid. Never looked too long." She pressed Grady the next day. He sighed, rubbing his weathered hands. "Folks say it's cursed. Granddad bought it off a shipwreck salvage, 1940s. Said it came with stories, people who owned it went mad, saw things. I don't believe it, but I ain't replacing it." Lisa wanted to quit, but rent loomed. That night, the bar was rowdy, fishermen celebrating a big haul, their laughter loud and drunk. She glanced up mid-shift, and the mirror exploded with faces, dozens now, packed tight, their mouths moving silently. She dropped a tray of glasses, the crash barely noticed over the noise. Paul grabbed her arm. "They're angry tonight," he muttered, and left fast. Closing alone, Lisa heard it, a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from the mirror. She looked, and the faces were gone, replaced by hands, pale, bony, pressing against the inside of the glass, smudging it with streaks. The tapping grew louder, insistent, and the crack in the mirror widened, a thin splinter snapping off. She backed away, heart pounding, and something new appeared, a figure, closer than the others, its face pressed flat against the glass, eyes locked on hers. It smiled, a slow, rotting grin, and the lights flickered, plunging the bar into shadow for a heartbeat. The next night, Paul came back, drunk and agitated. "They're calling me," he slurred, pointing at the mirror. Lisa saw it too, his reflection warped, hands reaching out from the glass toward him. He grabbed a shot glass from the counter and hurled it at the mirror, screaming, "Leave me alone." The glass shattered against it, but the mirror didn't break, just rippled, like water, and the hands retreated. Paul staggered out, and Lisa locked up, the tapping echoing behind her as she fled into the night. Lisa couldn't sleep after that. She dug into the Black Mare's history, scouring library records and old newspapers. In 1947, a fishing boat, the Sea Wraith, sank off the coast, killing all 32 aboard. The Mirror, salvaged from the wreck, ended up at the pub. Articles hinted at strange reports, crewmen claiming they'd seen faces in the ship's glass before the disaster, pleading for help. A later story, from 1963, described a bartender who'd smashed the mirror after seeing the dead in it, only for it to be replaced with the same one, found intact in storage. Locals whispered it held the crew, trapped and restless. She told Grady, begging him to get rid of it. He scoffed, "Superstition don't pay bills," but his hands shook as he poured his coffee. That night, her last shift, the bar was dead, storm outside, no customers. The mirror hummed, a low vibration she felt in her bones. The faces returned, clearer than ever, gaunt, waterlogged, seaweed tangled in their hair. The figure from before stepped forward, its rotting grin wide, and spoke, voice like drowning, "You see us now." The hands slammed against the glass, the cracked spiderwebbing outward. Lisa grabbed a bottle and smashed it against the mirror, desperate to end it. The glass cracked but held, and the figure laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. The lights died, and she ran, leaving her keys behind. Days later, she heard the black mare had flooded, freak wave, they said, ruining everything but the mirror, which hung untouched. Lisa moved inland, but she still sees them in every reflection, faces in windows, car mirrors, even puddles, watching, waiting. Paul vanished that week, his boat found adrift, empty. She knows they're not done.